In my world, this is a rubber duck. It comes in California with a warning: this product contains chemicals known by the state of California to cause cancer and birth defects or other reproductive harm. What kind of culture would produce a product of this kind and then label it and sell it to children? I think we have a design problem. The fundamental issue is that, for me, design is the first signal of human intention. So what are our intentions? What would our intention be as a species, now that we're the dominant species? Now, as guardians, let's say the state, for example, which reserves the right to kill, the right to be duplicitous, and so on. The question we're asking the guardian at this point is, how are we meant to secure local societies, create world peace, and save the environment? But I don't know that that's the common debate. So we use the tools of commerce primarily for our work, but the question we bring to it is, how do we love all the children of all species for all time? And so we start our designs with that question. Because what we realize today is that modern culture appears to have adopted a strategy of tragedy. If we come here and say, well, I didn't intend to cause global warming on the way here, and we say it's not part of my plan, then we realize it's part of our de facto plan because it's the thing that's happening because we have no other plan. And I was at the White House for President Bush, meeting with every federal department and agency, and I pointed out that they appear to have no plan. If the end game is global warming, they're doing great. If the end game is mercury toxification of our children downwind of coal-fired plants as they scuttle the Clean Air Act, then I see that our education program should be explicitly defined as brain death for all children, no child left behind. So perhaps we could develop a strategy of change, which requires humility. As Kevin Kelly pointed out, there is no end game. There's an infinite game, and so we call it Cradle to Cradle. And our goal is very simple. This is what I presented to the White House. Our goal is a delightfully diverse, safe, healthy, and just world with clean air, clean water, soil, and power, economically, equitably, ecologically, and elegantly enjoyed, period. So we realize we want full diversity, even though it can be difficult. But at the same time, we realize that our products are not safe and healthy. So we've designed products and we analyze chemicals down to the parts per million. Water has been declared a human right by the United Nations. Air quality is an obvious thing to anyone who breathes. Clean soil is a critical problem, and nitrification, the dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, a fundamental issue that's not being addressed. We've seen the first form of solar energy that's beat the hegemony of fossil fuels in the form of wind here in the Great Plains, and so that hegemony is leaving. We see that companies acting ethically and in this world are outperforming those that don't. We see the flows of materials in a rather terrifying prospect. This is a hospital monitor from Los Angeles sent to China. This woman will expose herself to toxic phosphorus, release 4 pounds of toxic lead into her children's environment to retrieve from copper. On the other hand, we see great signs of hope. Here's Dr. Venkataswamy in India, who's figured out how to do mass-produced health. He has given eyesight to 2 million people for free. We see in our material flows that car steels don't become car steel again because of the contaminants of the coatings, and they become building steel. On the other hand, we're working with Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, and Shaw Carpet, the largest carpet company in the world. We've developed a carpet that is continuously recyclable down to the parts per million. The upper is nylon 6. That can go back to caprolactam, the bottom a polyolefin, infinitely recyclable thermoplastic. Now, if I was a bird, the building on my left is a liability. The building on my right, which was our corporate campus for the Gap with an ancient meadow, is an asset. It's nesting grounds. So we're looking for the design rules of this. This is the highest biodiversity of trees in the world, Irian Jaya, 259 species of tree. And we described this in the book, Cradle to Cradle. The book itself is a polymer. It is not a tree. And to use something as elegant as a tree, imagine this design assignment. Design something that makes oxygen, sequesters carbon, fixes nitrogen, distills water, accrues solar energy as fuel, makes complex sugars in food, creates microclimates, changes colors with the seasons, and self-replicates. Why don't we knock that down and write on it? We're looking at the same criteria as most people. Can I afford it? Does it work? Do I like it? We're adding the Jeffersonian agenda. We're adding life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Chinese government has now, I work with the Chinese government now, has taken this up. We're also looking at survival of fittest, not in just competition terms in our modern context of destroy the other or beat them to the ground, but really to fit together and build niches and have growth that is good. Now, most environmentalists don't say growth is good because in our lexicon, asphalt is 2 words assigning blame. But if we look at asphalt as our growth, then we realize that all we're doing is destroying the planetary's fundamental underlying operating system. Francis Crick pointed out 9 years after discovering DNA with Mr. Watson, that life itself has to have growth as a precondition, it has to have free energy, sunlight, and it needs to be an open system of chemicals. So we're asking for human artifice to become a living thing, and we want growth, we want free energy from sunlight, and we want an open metabolism of chemicals. Then the question becomes not growth or no growth, but what do you want to grow? So instead of just growing destruction, we want to grow the things that we might enjoy, and someday the FDA will allow us to make French cheese. So therefore, we have these two metabolisms, and I work with a German chemist, Michael Braungart. We've identified the two fundamental metabolisms, the biological one, I'm sure you understand, but also the technical one, where we take materials and put them into closed cycles. We call them biological nutrition and technical nutrition. Technical nutrition will be in an order of magnitude of biological nutrition. We need materials in closed cycles, but we need to analyze them down to the parts per million for cancer, birth defects, mutagenic effects, disruption in our immune systems, biodegradation, persistence, heavy metal content, knowledge of how we're making them and their production, and so on. Our first product was a textile where we analyzed 8,000 chemicals in the textile industry. Using those intellectual filters, we eliminated 9,762. We were left with 38 chemicals. We have since databased the 4,000 most commonly used chemicals in human manufacturing, and we're releasing this database into the public in 6 weeks. So designers all over the world can analyze their products down to the parts per million for human and ecological health. And this is our project for Ford Motor Company. It's the revitalization of the River Rouge. In Dearborn, this is obviously a color photograph. These are our tools. These are how we sold it to Ford. We saved Ford $35 million doing it this way. Day one, which is the equivalent with the Ford Taurus at a 4% margin of an order for $900 million worth of cars. Here it is. It's the world's largest green roof, 10.5 acres. This is a roof, saving money. And this is the first species to arrive. Here, these are killdeer. They showed up in 5 days. And we now have 350-pound auto workers learning bird songs on the internet. We're developing now protocols for cities as the home of technical nutrients, the country the home of biological, and putting them together. And so I will finish by showing you a new city we're designing for the Chinese government. We're doing 12 cities for China right now, based on Cradle to Cradle, as templates. Our assignment is to develop protocols for the housing 400 million people in 12 years. We did a mass energy balance. If they use brick, they will lose all their soil and burn all their coal. They'll have cities with no energy and no food. These are our cities. We're building a new city next to this city. Look at that landscape. This is the site. We don't normally do green fields, but this one is about to be built. So they brought us in to intercede. This is their plan. It's a rubber stamp grid that they laid right on that landscape, and they brought us in and said, what would you do? This is what they would end up with, which is another color photograph. So this is the existing site. So this is what it looks like now, and here's our proposal. So the way we approach this is we study the hydrology very carefully. We study the biota, the ancient biota, the current farming, and the protocols. We study the winds and the sun to make sure everybody in the city will have fresh air, fresh water, and a direct sunlight in every single apartment at some point during the day. We then take the parks and lay them out as the ecological infrastructure. We lay out the building areas. We start to integrate commercial mixed use so that people all have centers and places to be. The transportation is all very simple. Everybody's within 5-minute walk of mobility. We have 24-hour street so that there's always a place that's alive. The waste systems all connect. If you flush a toilet, your feces will go to the sewage treatment plants, which are sold as assets, not liabilities, because who wants the fertilizer factory that makes natural gas? The waters are all taken into constructed wetlands for habitat restorations, and then it makes natural gas, which then goes back into the city to power the fuel for the cooking for the city. So these are fertilizer gas plants. And then the compost is all taken back to the roofs of the city where we've got farming, because what we've done is lifted up the city, the landscape into the air to restore the native landscape on the roofs of the buildings. The solar power of all the factory centers and all the industrial zones with their light roofs powers the city. And this is the concept for the top of the city. We've lifted the earth up onto the roofs. The farmers have little bridges to get from one roof to the next. We inhabit the city with work-live space on all the ground floors. And so this is the existing city, and this is the new city.